Hey guys, I recently made a video talking about how I think that Rogue is the actual GOAT and asked for anyone to show me why that's not the case in a quick succinct video. Feardragon went ahead and did that, so we're going to go ahead and take a look at this, and I did just watch this and think about it a little bit, and we're going to go ahead and respond to this. So let's go.
Hey Dan, this is going to be covered on two different videos on Twitter because I don't feel like uploading to YouTube. So first of all, you talked about Premier Weekend tournaments as the main complaint that people have had. First of all, that is not nearly as many tournaments as Serral's won in Premier Weekend tournaments. You didn't specify anything besides Premier Weekend tournaments. And
I did specify online and region lock are not good, but
Premier is a category of tournaments defined on Liquipedia based on prize money and who's eligible to play. Serral's won a lot more than those. We'll cover those later. I also want to just note, IM Katowice 2020 was not, in fact, a global finals event. The global finals event for 2019's year was BlizzCon 2019. IM Katowice 2020 was similar to the previous IM Katowices, where it wasn't actually global finals.
All right, so real quick on that, if I'm recalling this correctly, BlizzCon that year was canceled due to the COVID stuff, and then it became obvious that BlizzCon was not coming back, and the World Championship naturally transitioned the following year to IM Katowice, right? So I guess technically in 2020, we don't have a world champion, although that would have been it if we had known that BlizzCon would be canceled. And like I said, it got transferred over this year, or it got transferred over the next year because there was no more BlizzCons. And now, in fact, this year, Katowice is not the World Championship because it's being transferred over to the Saudi Arabian event, which in, a few years' time, if StarCraft 2 is still going on and the Saudi Arabian tournament pulls out, then it will transition back to Katowice. So I guess technically this is correct. We could move this down to the Premier Weekend tournament with the other lists of IM Katowices. But, that it is what it is. Let's go.
So that's one thing. Now, you love offline events and you love offline wins. You categorize them as being more important. Let's talk about offline victory versus Koreans. Serral's offline win rates versus Koreans is 62% in games, 69%. And again, these are versus Maru, Dark, Beyond, Hero, Cure, Solar. I mean, you have to scroll pretty far down to finally find some Koreans that are not necessarily top level players like Quanta. And then even after that, you have to scroll even further down to find more like that. Rogue, on the other hand, because we're going to compare versus Rogue a lot, is 57% and 60%. So almost 5 and 10% lower respectively. And he's playing versus other Korean players that simply are just padding his win rates like Lunacy and, again, Quanta. So he should have a higher win rate if he was just better than Serral, but his win rate's actually lower.
Okay, just a few things here. First off, these are not all offline events, obviously. A lot of this is online. Also, I should mention that Rogue, the majority of his games you're going to find are played in preparation style tournaments as opposed to weekend tournaments. So just some small things. But even though we might see here a difference in win percentage, 5 to 10%, as I believe Feardragon says, that 5 to 10% is not something that I think is more valuable than winning a bunch of GSLs.
In those offline events.
Those are not all, again, not offline. Like we see Kung Fu Cup in there and stuff. So it's not all offline stuff. Ligulac is not the end all.
Let's really quickly talk about Serral versus Rogue as a head-to-head matchup. Now, I'll give you some credit on this one because they are actually relatively even. But let's talk about offline win rate. And, Serral's never lost to Rogue offline. I'm going to continue in part 2 because there is a bit more to cover.
Yes, so Serral obviously has a great record against Rogue offline. I don't really care about their online games. I just consider this a dominating record for Serral there. But I don't think that GOAT is at all defined by what two players have done specifically against each other, but rather what the players have won, right? That is the GOAT real definition, is the actual accomplishments, not necessarily what they've done against each other. We have situations where there's like practice bonjoas and stuff, right? where there are players that actually have winning records against some of these champions, but it doesn't matter because it doesn't happen in they don't have tournament victories, right? It's like you don't care what your record is. What matters is if you win the tournament. Let's go to the next video.
Okay, we're back. So we just covered win rate of head-to-head. Let's talk about the win rates of each one of these players since their first Premier Tournament victory, which is just going to exclude all of their early, like, rising up in the scene kind of stage of things. Serral has a 75% game record win rate and an 87% series record win rate, which is staggeringly high. In the meanwhile, Rogue, on the other hand, is 64 and 71%. Still very, very respectable. Rogue is still pretty freaking good, but it's just nowhere near the level of domination that Serral has had across his career ever since his first Premier Tournament victory. Let's talk about Liquipedia.
Okay, yeah, the win rate of Serral is amazing. I've actually been on record multiple times saying I think Serral is the strongest player in the world. He has reached the highest skill level anyone has ever reached. Between this and the win rate, I understand that people are arguing that this makes him the GOAT. I explained before the difference between a Bonjour and a GOAT. Just because someone's the best at a given time doesn't mean that they're the GOAT. And like, for instance, like LeBron James would smoke Michael Jordan in a 1v1. Does that mean, is that what gives him GOAT status? No, of course not. Of course not. So I don't know. I don't see that as important as the actual accomplishments.
Results. This is the list of premier tournaments that Serral's won. I'm going to give you some credit on this. Some of these we don't need to include here. Like European specific tournaments, I agree. There's like 3 or 4 of those. There's also a couple, like a handful of these online events. We can exclude those. Even then, it is still a much larger list of tournaments than Rogue has. I know that you don't want to include things like WCS Montreal and Valencia and Austin and Leipzig just because they were region locked, but I want to remind you that even GSL itself was region locked to an extent. It was soft region lock, where if you participated in GSL, you, especially for the year of like say 2019, for example, you were not allowed to compete in your region's qualifiers for the big events. So Serral couldn't play in the European regional if you played in GSL, same as how Scarlet and Rainer and many others did have to experience when they tried to play.
Okay, so if I'm not mistaken, that's not true. I'm trying to remember back right now, but unless I'm misremembering, there was never any sort of rule like that for GSL. I seem to recall like Special very consistently playing in both GSL and winning all the LATAM stuff. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure there was never any rule that if you played in GSL, you could not play in your other tournaments. So I do not believe that is true.
In GSL. Rogue does have a fair number of first place finishes, but I want to note actually his second and third place finishes, just his top 4 placement is a lot lower compared to say Serral's as well. And I think that's also something just to note about consistency that Serral has. Let's move on.
Okay, I need to hit on that a little bit, what he was just talking about between all these things, right? So he actually also placed a graphic when he posted this video. So I want to point this out, right? Because people are looking at my list, they're like, that's not right. And he gave me, right? He gave me that like the online stuff is not mattering as much. And he gave me that region lock stuff shouldn't really matter, right? So let's go ahead and look through this list that he posted. Okay, I have that included. This was online. I have that included. Team Liquid Star League 9, I think that's a kind of fair one. That's like, that was part online and part offline. It did have an offline, like I want to say top 8 if I'm remembering correctly. So that's somewhat reasonable. I could absolutely be swayed towards that. Home Story Cups, I did talk about, but we're talking about the most prestigious tournaments that there are. And Home Story Cup is not the same as like a DreamHack or a GSL or an IEM or anything like that. I think everyone agrees with that, even though Liquipedia is not like in charge of this. It's a great resource, but you do not put like a premier tournament, IEM Katowice 2024. Does that mean because this is on the same list that this is as prestigious? No, it does not. Okay, so let's keep going. I am Katowice 2022. I have that on there. Next 2021, that was online. Home Story Cup I talked about. That's on there. Home Story Cup I talked about. That's on there. That's on there. So we're looking at this list, and this is actually just not genuine because I did talk about Home Story Cup, and like you could count that. You could keep going down the tiers of tournaments, but I think everyone would agree that that is a bit lower. And I did include everything else. Maybe Team Liquid Star League is one that could count. Now, here is a comparison, right? So, and in fact, the video that I made was before Dallas, and obviously Serral just won Dallas. Congrats to him. Amazing victory. So dominant. Looked great. Let's take a look. I'm going to add that to the list even. Okay, so this is the completed, based upon what feardragon has said here and what I've said. This would be the completed list that he has being added on, right? So 3 Home Story Cups, TSL 9, which was half offline and half online, and then the DreamHack Dallas that Serral just won, which was fantastic. So are we trying to say that that is equal to the quality of 4 GSL Codas? Well, honestly, right now, like if you look at a GSL Codas right this second, I think that like DreamHack Dallas is actually probably a better tournament win than like a GSL Codas right now. I don't think that that was always the case with DreamHacks or IEMs or anything like that. But I think right now you could say that, and I would be like, yeah. But I don't think that you can take this. I think that this is the major thing that me and everyone else on Earth are disagreeing with. GSL Codas has value, and I think that you can see here. I don't think anyone would think that TSL 9 and the 3 Home Story Cups are better than 4 GSLs. Right? I don't think so. Okay, let's keep going.
Let's move on really quickly because I want to be fast. Win rate or prize money won. Yeah. Serral has just won more. Like,
I don't like putting prize money into this. Different amounts of prize money were given at different times. Does that mean that that player is better? I really don't think so. I think most people would agree with me on this. I think if you're trying to boil it down to who won the most money, it's like, Serral has been in a lot more tournaments than Rogue and a lot of region lock tournaments in a weaker region than where Rogue lives, right? There's more tournaments in Europe because StarCraft 2 is much more popular in Europe and North America than it is in Korea, right? So it makes sense that he's made a lot more money.
Significantly more, like 140 or something % more. There's something to be said about this meme over here, but
no.
Just, yeah, dude, Serral is so much more consistently better statistically than Rogue. Why are we even talking about this, Dan? Why are we bringing this up?
Why are we talking about this? Why are we bringing this up? Well, you know, when I saw everyone trying to argue whether Maru or Serral were the GOATs, that kind of like, that shocked me. That shocked me because I don't think you can really compare Maru to Serral because Serral's won way more of the international tournaments. Maru just doesn't have those big tournament wins, which I think are important, but somehow he was still considered for the running because of all of his GSL victories. Well, guess what? Rogue has 4 GSLs and then like pretty much equal numbers on the other super prestigious tournaments that Serral has. So to watch Rogue be completely ignored, look, I know that Serral and Maru basically have the most fans in the scene, but it doesn't matter if you're a fan or not. It doesn't matter if you think that Rogue's wins were like, a lot of times I remember when he would win, it's like, oh, this abusive Nidus Worm stuff or something. But the thing is, he consistently has won so many tournaments and he's won a better spread than everyone else. So I think that my argument is pretty valid there, but I do want to thank feardragon for actually responding instead of just brushing it off. Anyways, if you disagree, try to let me know without just acting like I'm crazy. I think that this is a very reasonable argument that I'm presenting. And again, I think that Serral is the strongest player that there has ever been. That does not mean that you're the GOAT. That does not mean that you're the GOAT. Whoever is like the strongest player in any game, in anything basically in the most recent time, generally that's actually the highest skill level that there's ever been. Even if there's like less competition right now, their actual skill level keeps going up. For anyone who's trying that stupid argument, the skill level is still going up. So the people who are winning tournaments now are of course better than anyone that won tournaments in the past. MVP cannot measure up, right? But that doesn't mean that we can't have a GOAT that isn't currently the best player. I think that's silly. Okay, anyways, thanks for watching. See ya.